Hey, Jay here. 450 shootout season 2019. They're all going on. Everybody's shooting out all these bikes. Couple things. So first of all, I am not much of a 450 rider. Last time I did like regularly, I dislocated my shoulder and knocked myself out. Yeah, it kind of sucked. So I've kind of swore them off. I do put them around. I will try them out, but I'm not much of a real gauge of what a 450 can really do. And I think there's a lot of guys like my speed are better that probably shouldn't be riding. They should be riding 250s and 350s. But I got David Pingree here with RacerX. He's a lot better rider than me, and he's also a pretty good tester. So what we're going to do is, since the bikes are all very close, and you hear that and everybody's trying to go, oh no, they're just saying that. No, they are all really close, and there's good traits of all of them, and there's some of them have some bad traits and so forth. So we're going to talk to David, get his opinion on each bike and maybe what and who it's best for, and kind of some of the good and bad of each bike. So first of all, thanks for doing this with us.
Of course. Yeah.
So first, let's talk about the bike that got the most updates for 2019. Realistically, and biggest news is the KX450. So, and it's not a 450F anymore. It's a KX450. So let's talk about that bike a little bit.
Well, for me, that was definitely, like you said, the biggest amount of changes and the biggest improvement. I've never been a Cowie 450 fan, just because they tended to feel a little tall, a little long, like a bigger bike, kind of designed or set up for a bigger rider. And the power, even though it had a ton of horsepower, the way it made it was kind of slow building and heavy feeling. And so it just didn't suit me. And it was never a terrible bike, but I never got off one and went, oh man, I love that. I need to ride that more, until this year. And the first day we rode this bike, was at Paula. I mean, literally in 2 laps, I'm just, when you're feeling it and you're kind of flowing, I'm just kind of little scrubs off jumps. I'm dropping into turns and going, man, I'm feeling it today. And at the end of the day, I loved the bike. I thought, man, maybe I just had a really good day. That bike couldn't be that good. So we rode it a second day at Milestone, and it was the same thing. Like, immediately, I was comfortable. Things, sections or corners that would normally take more energy, I was able to do just effortlessly. The bike just really, at least for me, complemented the way I wanted to ride, and everything from the electric start to the hydraulic clutch, the forks, which are an A-kit copy, Showa copy now, the chassis, the way that they redesigned sort of the narrower feel, all around great bike. I was blown away with how good it was, and so much so that's the bike I chose to ride this year. So huge improvements.
That says a lot. And I was there the second day you rode it, and when he came in, he said, if I could take these forks off and take them home and sleep with them, that'd be cool. Because you thought they were pretty
That
awesome.
sounds weird, but it's by far the best fork Kawasaki's ever put on their bike. And it's interesting because I got conflicting stories about whether this was the same fork as what's on the Honda. And it turns out it's the same essentially, but there's coatings on this one, not just the sliders, but the external coating on the inside of the upper fork tube. It's dimpled, which just allows it to flow a little easier. It keeps a little oil in those pockets. He described it to me like a golf ball, and so the oil sits in those little pockets, reduces friction, and it's noticeable. That's all I can tell you. I really loved the Honda fork, especially in 17. 18, it got a little firmer, but I was still good with it, and this is an improvement from that. So
KX450, the bike you really like, who do you think that bike is maybe best suited for that's looking to buy a 2019 450?
Honestly, I don't think that there's any one segment of riders. I think that if you are over about 185 pounds, you're probably going to need stiffer fork springs, stiffer springs all around. That fork, they said, tends to be sprung a little bit on the softer side. I'm 170, and I thought it was great. So to give you an idea, 175 is just good, 185, 190, and especially 200 plus, you're definitely going to need to go stiffer. And you can go to my dialed-in video at RacerX online, and I kind of run through some different fixes for that Kawasaki suggested. There's definitely some ways to address it without spending too much money. But I think that's, generally speaking, it's going to be, if you're a bigger guy, you'll still love the bike, you'll just need to respring it. I think from vet, novice, intermediate, expert, anybody can get on that bike and enjoy it. It's a usable, easy to ride power. It's electric start, which, big old boys like. I like it way better. It's funny how when it first came out, you're like, it was kind of like a novelty.
Right.
Now, if a bike has a Kickstarter, I'm like, what? I got to kickstart this thing?
No, it's silly. We used to think it was only for off-road bikes. Okay, so KX450, we know how you feel. So now let's talk about the KTM and Husqvarna. We'll kind of talk about those bikes together since they are very close. Let's talk about those two 450s.
Yeah, and the biggest change they made some chassis changes, trying to get a better feel, trying to find that flex rigidity characteristic that they want in the frame and the chassis. But the biggest thing I noticed was the engines. They gave it a lighter, quicker revving feeling, which is something all these manufacturers have been shooting for. Like I mentioned with the Kawasaki, the way it used to be, the horsepower numbers are there, but it builds slow and it just has a heavy feeling to it. Where this year, that bike, I would tell you, the Yamaha, the KTM, the Husky, they all have a really light, free, quick revving feeling to them. And it almost feels two-stroke-ish, where it just picks up really quick, and it's an exciting feeling, and it makes the bike feel lighter, even though the weight is not any different. If you can get that real light, free, connected feeling, the whole bike feels lighter.
And that's what I noticed. And I just rode the Honda 450, and I noticed how it just is like right there, and it feels like your hand is just spinning that rear wheel instantly connected to your arm.
Yeah, it was a big step forward when we went to fuel injection with that instantaneous response between the throttle and the tire. And then now just between everybody fine-tuning mapping and whatever it is inside that gives it that lighter, quicker feeling, they're all figuring it out, and it's getting to be a lot of fun.
So in these KTM and Husqvarna, who would you kind of say these two bikes, these bikes got some decent changes this year, and these bikes were both kind of winning a lot of the shootouts the last few years. And now the Japanese bikes we talked about are catching up. We're going to talk about a few more of them, are catching up without a doubt. So where do you think these kind of bikes fall as far as like who'd maybe the target guys for these bikes?
Well, I think that again, there isn't a specific a target audience for these things. The KTM tends to be a little bit firmer feeling than the Husky. There's more flex in the subframe of the Husky. It had a bar that flexed more. The swing arm was slightly different, less material, so it flexed a little more. So in general, you'd get a more compliant feeling with the Husky. I tend to like that. I got older guy, kind of, I don't like my wrists and knees jarred the way I used to do it all the time. So I like that softer feeling. But again, it's very, very subtle changes. You're kind of splitting hairs between the two of them. They both have great features. The traction control feature is incredible, something that I feel like the Japanese manufacturers need to catch up on. But novice, intermediate expert, old guy, young kid, you're going to love this bike. They're so tunable as well. If you got somebody that can map it for you, or one tooth up, one tooth down, these things are so rideable. They come with different maps, a standard and an aggressive. If you do the standard map with the traction control, it really softens it up, and it will make you a better rider. So if you are a novice, this is one thing that I guess would be to consider is anytime you go from traction to like a slippery spot, whether it's muddy slick or hard dry slick, that traction control does the work for you. It modulates the throttle for you, or the RPM. So it will make you feel like a better rider. And I've played with it on both maps, and I actually a lot of times like the aggressive map with the traction control on, because it just helps me. It's one less thing I got to worry about.
So two good bikes. Again, you get a lot of stuff. Now, basically every bike's gone away from air forks. I found that the KTM and Husqvarna air fork is about the only one that was kind of usable. And so they still have that AER 48 fork, which I know you're not a huge fan of, but compared to the other air forks, what are your thoughts on that fork?
It's definitely the best air fork. Is that like saying you're the valedictorian at summer school? Maybe. But all of these aftermarket companies are making a spring conversion kit for them now. I've been running the Pro Circuit kit on my Husky 125 that I've had, and it's night and day. Just a more planted, solid, consistent feeling, and it's easy. It's one fork. They drop a spring in it, and their little cartridge kit, and it's done. So it's very simple. Race Tech, factory connection. They all make them.
Very cool. Okay, so now let's jump over to the RMZ 450, which is a bike over the last few years you spent a lot of time on. You'd ride it in the hills in the winter. I'd catch you riding that bike a lot. That bike is the only one in the class without electric start. but still a good bike. They've updated some stuff for 19. What are your thoughts on that bike?
Yeah, it's good. It's you know, I think everybody was a little bit let down last year. Just seeing it has a really cool, sleek look to it. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Suzuki's because I grew up racing them as an amateur, and they've just always been a comfortable bike for me. I think my favorite bike when I was a pro was my 2000 RM125. So to this day, still my favorite race bike. What I found last year in that 18 was that, and going back even further, with the 17 bike, I said, man, if they just put a good fork on here, find a way to carve out about 8 pounds, and just meet up the power a little bit, man, this is a competitive bike. They wouldn't need to go reinvent the wheel. So I was really optimistic last year when it came out. The engine missed the mark. It was still a little slow. The suspension, they went with this all-new Showa stuff, and I just think they came out with it a little too early. They should have let it develop a little more. They've improved some of those settings for 19, but I would still say the stuff you find on the Cowie, the Honda, and even the KYB stuff on the Yamaha is better suspension. So as much as I'd love to pull for them and say that they figured it out this year, I think they're still off. I think it's still a better suspension setting, 10 pounds, electric start, and a high compression piston away from being amazing. On my 18, I literally put a high compression piston on, an exhaust, and had the suspension set up, and I loved it.
Yep.
It was competitive with any other 450. I was comfortable on it. I had a ball on it, so it's not far off.
But you did make me kickstart it for you when we were at the track.
That's true. I did have a hard time getting it started at one point. So again, that's on my list of things for them to fix for 2020. Give me electric start, put it on a diet, high compression piston, better suspension settings.
All right, so now we're going to go to the Yamaha YZ450. This thing got just a few little refinements for 2019. The bike's kind of been a love-hate thing with a lot of the guys. I love the 250 because I can actually handle it, but the 450 guys seem to love it or hate it. They're kind of right in there. So what are your thoughts on the 19 version?
Yeah, again, I've always not really been a fan of the Yamaha, just because ever since they went to this new generation, it felt big and wide at the front, and then it felt like there was way too much front end bias. And so the front end felt really nervous all the time, and then if I added sag, tried to get some weight off that front, then the back end, then the front end was dancing. I just could never find a balance to where if I was doing laps hitting the same line every time, I never felt like I could stick the same line every time. If I came into a turn that was sweeping in with bumps, it kind of would do its thing, and then I'd settle in wherever I was. I couldn't ever look ahead and go, yep, I'm going right there, and it wouldn't track with me. This year, they did listen to some of the feedback that we all gave them. Too much pitching and yawing. I don't know, that's a sailing term. I don't know if that's the right thing, but when you get on the brakes, it would dive too much this way. When you accelerate, it would go too much this way. Just that the chassis was being upset too much, so they firmed up the suspension settings so that it didn't squat as much when you accelerated, and it didn't dive so much when you hit the brakes. That in itself made a big difference. Then they added chassis changes, and I think, according to them, the biggest change they made, and all I can tell you is what it felt like on the track, was the axle lug shoulders there. They added material. The wheel spacers added material a little bit bigger, and you think that seems crazy.
It does seem crazy. When they told me about it, I'm like, is that really going to make any difference?
And it absolutely does. It absolutely does. That, in conjunction with the suspension changes they made and the chassis changes, really calmed this bike down. They went to work narrowing the radiator shrouds, and you noticed that. And even some of the noise that was annoying in the past, the really loud sucking sound, that's gone, kind of quieted down. So everything that I think the feedback they were getting, Yamaha did a really good job of taking it in and saying, all right, let's work on these things. And the changes they made are significant on the track, even though they may seem minor reading about them in a brochure.
So again, you think this is a lot better bike than years past, and as far as you think, again, anybody can go wrong with this bike, you think?
No, I don't think so. The one thing that Yamaha does well is it has excellent suspension, and it has a ton of motor. This motor probably has more potential. if just in terms of producing raw horsepower than any of the 450s. So if you're a bigger guy that really wants a lot of horsepower, or you're a pro level rider, it's definitely a bike to consider. But I talk about, this is one of the reasons I don't really care for shootouts. They're all so stinking close. I would basically put them all in a tie with Suzuki in second. Essentially, because it's so subjective. I love the Cowie this year. That it just really fits me. It's comfortable for me. There was guys in other shootouts I've read that picked it last, and I'm going, how in the world can you pick that last?
No,
It's insane to me.
Yeah, I get that. And the Yamaha we're talking about has a cool feature of their tuning device, and they actually have maps available. Travis Preston map. I call Travis, that's his name now, Travis Preston map, and because it gets mentioned all the time. So they actually have the maps available for people to look at, which I think is kind of cool and something most Japanese manufacturers have never really pushed. And did you try some of those other maps?
Yep, we did. We ran through. Travis had his kind of the map that they put in last year, and then he made an updated map, which was very, very similar to last year's map. But it just fills in some of those little flat spots, sharpens it up. I think anybody would like that map better than stock. I don't know why they don't just put it in as the stock map, but it is a cool feature. For me, the power tuner was a little intimidating. You're plugging this thing in, and I kind of felt like the Matthew Broderick in War Games trying to beat that computer. I just could. I'm a little bit of a idiot when it comes to tech sometimes. So
we're also very old. If you remember Matthew
right.
Broderick in War Games, we're going to seem like ridiculously old.
Yeah, only guys 40 plus are going to get that reference. But anyway, the app is so easy. He downloaded it on my phone, and there was like a few clicks, and you're there. And it keeps parameters so you can't blow your bike up.
Right.
And again, once they've got those maps available to you, like the Preston map is in there, you just go, let's try that one, And it's easy to plug it in and then just try it and go, I like it, I don't like it, I don't know the difference. But you can bounce around and try them very easily. And it's just a lot more user-friendly.
And so that's a really cool feature with the Yamaha, for sure. And that's also on the new 250, which is a cool feature. So the last bike we're going to talk about is the Honda 450, which has gotten some decent updates, and they've actually tried to go after some handling and power differences for 19. One thing about the Honda 450, I did all the tires for Dirt Rider the other day, and we were at the dyno, and the Honda was substantially better kind of throughout as far as top power. Now, it doesn't mean it's better to ride, but it just means as far as better overall power. I shouldn't say, I don't know if I say better, but most overall power. So it was about 2 horse better than the Yamaha Husky, right up, and the Cowie right in there. So it was really cool to see, and that's what I've heard from kind of everybody else's dyno runs. So the thing's pretty dang fast in there. And as far as the rest of the bike, what do you feel about the power and the rest of that bike?
Yeah, well, and the neat thing about the Honda Power is that it doesn't get away from you. It's not like so much power that you feel like you can't hold on to it. The way they deliver it's very usable and friendly. So that's a very tough combination to master, is making a bunch of horsepower but then also making it usable. And I think Honda really did a great job with that. The chassis changes this year were pretty minor. I'd have to go back to back with a brand new 18 to probably feel those. But still a really great bike. That was just my general impression walking away from that intro was good all around. And again, any novice to expert, you can't go wrong with that thing. It's comfortable the second you jump on it. The suspension's pretty stinking good. It's good components. So even if you're a heavy guy or a light guy and you need to respring or revalve, it's good stuff. So someone can make it work great for you. Brakes are good. Everything about it. The Honda is just they just do a good job of finishing everything off right.
Okay, so it sounds great. Now, the durability on the Hondas we know is good, and that's a choice of a lot of the privateer pros because they want bikes that hold up, and a lot of them have been Honda guys. Their dads are Honda guys, so that tends to be a lot of what we see in the pit. As far as the kind of a summary here, you and I talked earlier about how, hey, in California here we have tons of good dealerships all around. Some good, some not so good, but there's a lot of them. In different parts of the country, you might only have one good, say, Kawasaki shop that's 200 miles from here or whatever. So what are your thoughts on, dealing with your local dealer and how much impact that has on buying a new bike?
Yeah, and this is something, even when we were doing shootouts at Racer X, I would always preface everything by saying, look, these things are all good. If you are vet rider, novice, beginner, even intermediate, your lap time isn't going to change from one to the other. From the one that wins the shootout to the one that gets last, you're going to be able to go the same speed. It's really not going to affect it. So I would focus more on what dealer is going to take good care of you. They're going to give you a deal on the bike. They're going to help you with service if you need it, give you a good deal on parts. Maybe they give you a break on oil and whatever. Go with that dealer. What brands does he sell? Then break it down like, okay, well, he sells Honda and Yamahas. Sit on them. What bike feels more comfortable? Maybe your buddy has one. Try riding it. You can read the shootouts, read people's, read our introductions and stuff like that we do, and get a general idea. But you can't go wrong. So that's the great thing. The great news right now for a motocross fan is you could pick any color. You're going to go out and have a ball. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to love your bike. They each have their own little quirks that you may want to fix based on the way you ride. If you ride off the back of the bike, or you leave, you're very far forward and you steer with the front tire, it just, everybody's different. Everything is subjective. That's why the shootouts are a little weird to me. And, frankly, if you grew up a Honda guy, you're always going to feel more comfortable on a Honda.
And I do, yeah.
I don't care, even if I put you on another bike for a while, you're going to get on the Honda and go, oh yeah, this feels like home. So you can't take that subjectivity out of a test rider. Another reason I just don't care for those. So, stick to a color you like if you've had good luck with it. Like I said, they're all turning out great products right now.
That's awesome. And so I think it's a great point. I think it's important that you have a dealer that you deal with that's going to help you if you're going to buy a bike there. If you've actually watched this entire video and wasted half your lunch hour, yeah, it's going to be it's a world record breaking long interview here, but it's been fun. It's cool to get some input from someone like this. I will say, to your point, I was thinking about it. I was thinking back, especially to the carbureted bikes, let's say from 04 to say 09, in that range, the bikes weren't that close. It typically, every year, the Honda was really good, 450 for instance, and you pretty much going into it, you kind of knew the order. It was real easy, and most of the riders all agreed. Now at these shootouts, I'll see riders with just drastically different opinions, like you said, and sometimes you go, oh, they're getting paid off by whoever or whatever, but it's really not the case. A lot of them just feel more comfortable, like you feel totally comfortable on the Cowie, and I got guys who swear that the Yamaha is the best bike, and good riders, and you can see where they're coming from. So I don't think you're going to go wrong with any of them. All really good bikes, and again, your dealer and what kind of deal you get, and your support you're going to need going forward, that kind of stuff, and yeah, that's about it. So thanks, Bing, and we'll see you guys out at the track, hopefully.